wanted to get off of Earth.
You're playing to be an expendable?
From Bong Joon-ho, director of Parasite.
Every time I died, they just printed me out again.
Comes a genre-bending epic.
Mickey, what's it feel like to die? My great gift to mankind.
Starring Robert Pattinson, Naomi Ackie, Stephen Yeun, with Toni Collette and Mark Ruffalo.
This is so exciting!
Have a nice death. See you tomorrow.
Mickey 17, in cinemas March 7. Book tickets now.
Amazon brings the UEFA Champions League.
What a fantastic night of football.
Tuesday's unmissable match. It doesn't get much better than that.
Life's a long ass journey with some fool. Oh, I love the way you dance. Oh, how you move. sink your wild tiger teeth in my neck, till the blood flows. Life's a long ass journey with some fool that wrote the map. Everyone's digging for the cross on the page. No one knows where it's at. 'Cause I love the way you move, love what you do, everything you are to me. 'Cause I love the way you walk, love what you talk, everything you do is neat. Love to know how, baby, I could get a chance just to look in your eyes. Maybe I could be your man. 'Cause I love the way you move, love what you do, everything you are to me. 'Cause I love the way you walk, love what you talk, everything you do is neat. 'Cause I love the way you move, love what you do, everything you are to me. Just to look in your eyes, maybe I could be your man. Too many nights, too many lows, so many problems I can't solve. We on a high, we on a roll. We should keep on moving, don't stay out here in the cold. Hope there's someone above me. Oh, lift me up when I'm heavy. Oh, guide me up when I go deep. Ooh, hope there's someone above me. Oh, keep looking back, not letting go. So many wasted days on hold. We on a fire, we ever grow. We should stick together, stay till our time to go. Hope there's someone above me. Lift me up when I'm heavy. Guide me up when I go deep. Ooh, hope there's someone above me. I've been stuck here down below, waiting for a sign to show. There's so much that we don't know, that we don't know. Hope there's someone above me. Oh, lift me up when I'm heavy. Oh, guide me up when I go deep. Ooh, hope there's someone above me. Oh, yeah.
3 kids, filthy football kids, 2 windswept parents, and 1 muddy dog. Life throws a lot at the Mazda's CX-5, an SUV that's ready for any family adventure. It's available with low-rate finance of 2.9% APR representative when financed through Mazda Financial Services and ordered before the 31st of March 2025. Search Mazda. Available on PCP when financed by 30th of June 2025. Optional final payment for ownership. Indemnities may be required. 18s and over. Terms apply.
If Galaxy chocolate tastes good to you, wouldn't it be great if it did good for others too? That's why by 2030, we commit to help 1 million people, including women, their families, and their communities thrive. Just a little drop of pleasure could create ripples of hope. Galaxy chocolate. Your pleasure has promise. Find out more at galaxychocolate.co.uk.
Suas mentiras, valeu pour les places dans ton coração, plein de mirage. Le vent dans ta voix pas, avec les vrais beautés yeux, le vois sur mon visage, sinon t'as mis larmes. Dans tes grands faits, je suis là, et là, pour les places sans plein de tirage. Ta voix pas, avec les vrais beautés yeux. Sinon t'as mis larmes. Dans tes grands faits, je suis là, et là, pour les places sans plein de mirages. Le vent dans ta voix pas, tes yeux nagent, le vois sur mon visage. Non, larmes.
L'amour, I love.
Hair pitch black like the midnight sky. Eyes like the jungle, you're something wild. Her sweet melody sings wherever I go, running through my mind, singing this role. Maybe I'll write a letter from this little old country town down in Texas. I'll keep it here for you. Mary Ellen, Mary Ellen, Mary Ellen, Mary Ellen. Mary Ellen, Mary Ellen, Mary, can we go together? Nothing here changes, seasons go by. You said hello, you said goodbye. Did you run away, Mary Ellen? Where did you go? Somewhere new, somewhere old. Maybe I'm not ever gonna live alone in the country town down in Texas. The memory of you, Mary Ellen, Mary Ellen, Mary Ellen, Mary Ellen. Mary Ellen, Mary Ellen, Mary Ellen, Mary
Gunnersbury Park Libertines Festival, yeah. With the Lambrini Girls, Hack Baker,
Soft Play,
and Supergrass. Lovely place as well, with beautiful old oak trees there. I think so, yeah.
Did you see the stylish kid?
You clearly want to make something. So why not just make it? Worst come to worst, what's gonna happen? You make it, someone says they don't like it. Will you like it? That's all that matters. So go do that.
The McDonald's McCrispy. Chicken perfection. It's crispy, juicy, and oh, so tender. And you can't forget the delicious, creamy mayo and the... Oh, what was I saying? Right, the McCrispy. Too good to ignore. Served after 11 a.m., subject to availability.
Can I replace all your lonely nights? Lonely nights. Can I replace all your lonely nights? Lonely nights.
Pick up every word.
Good.
Instagram Live. This. Actually, we've got, I don't know how many people we actually have on the
Can I replace all your lonely nights? Lonely nights. Can I replace all your lonely nights? Lonely nights.
my name is Jessica. I'm the head of the Scoop here at Queen's Radio, and I'm helping organise this, and I'm co-moderator with my lovely Izzy here.
Hi, I'm Izzy. I'm written deputy of the Scoop at Queen's Radio, and I'm an aspiring journalist. I'm excited to see what you lovely ladies have to say today.
Yeah, so we're going to introduce our panel here today.
Yeah, so first over here we have the lovely Stephanie Costello. She is a journalist covering the Labour beat for the Dublin Inquirer. She is also a PhD candidate at TUD, as well as an assistant lecturer at TUD's School of Media.
Then we have Claire Graham here. She has a decade of experience at BBC Northern Ireland, BBC 5 Live and BBC World Service, so she's definitely a familiar face in Northern Ireland here.
And then next to Claire we have the lovely Suzanne Breen. She has notably broken an extensive barrier coming into political journalism as a woman in Northern Ireland, and she is currently political editor of the Belfast Telegraph, so close to home. That's good.
And last but not least, we're joined by Eileen Dunn, who is definitely a household name across Ireland, having 40 years of experience with RTE, recently just retired as an RTE broadcaster. So thank you all so much for joining us today. We're very excited to discuss all of this with you. So we're just going to dive straight in. Stephanie, I'm going to start with you. So could you tell us what initially inspired you to pursue journalism? And, was there this defining moment that solidified your decision to go into the field?
I have always been very interested in social issues and politics. From a very young age, I was fascinated with understanding how the world worked, and sort of, I grew up in a flat complex in Ringsend, and I so from a young age noticed like all these differences between, let's say, me and then like going to more affluent areas, and it's just started something in my mind of trying to understand how the world worked, and I actually wanted to be a politician when I was about 15 or 16. I was like, that's what I'm going to do. I'm going to be a politician. I want to change things. And then something happened. I think it was a project I did on in sixth year in secondary school on Edward R. Murrow, and I realised that actually I wanted to hold the politicians to account, and being a journalist was the thing that I really wanted to do. So yeah, inspired really by just social issues and trying to make the world a better place, although I'm probably not supposed to say that because we're supposed to be impartial observers, but that's the truth.
Yeah, I absolutely started off like that as well. I studied politics and international relations here. I went in wanting to be a politician or like a diplomat, something like that. And then I was like, I want to hold them to account now. So yeah, we've definitely similar experiences. But I'm going to direct the same question to you, Claire.
So my very first byline, I was age 6. I wrote into a magazine called The Bunty, which none of you will know, but it was like a girly version of the Beano or the Dandy. And I wrote a little piece about my big sister, how much I loved her, sent in a picture of us, did this all behind my mother's back, got a stamp, posted it, sent it off, and they sent me 3 Cindy's in the post. In typical West Belfast mother fashion from my own mother, she lifted 2 of the Cindy's, wrapped them, kept them for Christmas, and I was allowed to keep the other Cindy. I guess I've always liked telling stories and entertaining people in some shape or form. It's interesting you say about politics. I think a lot of journalists think that at some point, because they're interested in politics, they may want to go into politics. In my 3rd year of university, I did a placement in Westminster with an MP, and I have to say I was more jealous of the media who worked in the lobby or in the press room and things like that. So I thought to myself, no, tick the box, I don't think politics is for me, and I'd like to go into journalism. But I only really picked that up properly when I was about 21, 22. But as I say, the bylines date back to 6-year-old me. I've still got about 10 copies of that in my mother's house, and yeah, I think it comes into storytelling and being able to tell other people's stories. It's such a cliche, but I think that's where that comes from. And you flirt with the idea of politics, but it just wasn't for me.
Amazing, yeah. I worked in the Dole over the summer, and I was just like, get me into the press office,
Yeah.
So I actually managed to meet with the press secretary, Anya McMahon, as well, and it was so nice to see see that because I'm not always like I'd love to be the press secretary in the White House because that just looks like a cool job. Not right now, but yeah, no, I love the whole like political end of it as well. Yeah, so really interesting kind of inspirations there as well to get into the field. Yeah.
Eileen, I'm gonna direct this question at you. First of all, can you please tell us about your first job in journalism and what was that experience like for you, and what did you learn early on in your career?
Well, I started out as a radio announcer, so I didn't study journalism. I just did an arts degree in UCD. I did Irish and French, and then I went to France teaching for a year, and then I came back and started work as a radio announcer. And so it was more from, I'd always been into debating and public speaking and did a bit of acting and stuff like that when I was a student. But so it wasn't the journalism end of it that brought me in the first place. But at the same time, I've always been interested in politics too, and there was a lot of politics in my home, constant discussions and stuff like that. I think you've heard me say before that when I was doing my degree in UCD for my French, for the final year oral exam, we had to do a project, and I did it on the French election because I had been in France the previous summer and it was starting to kick off. And American politics too, big time, because my father was a big fan of the Kennedys and all that kind of thing. So there was always a lot of political discussion around at home. So I suppose I was working as an announcer for 4 years. That gave me a chance to do some programs, some concerts and things like that. And I started doing bits for Women Today, which those of you old enough to remember, it was a specific, it was in the Liveline slot, but it was a specific program, like Woman's Hour on the BBC. And but then I got into trouble because I was a member of Equity, the trade union, and some of my colleagues objected because I wasn't a member of the NUJ, so I was stopped from doing them.
Wow.
So that annoyed me.
Yeah.
And then I ended up years later with dual membership, and there are not that many of us in the country left. There's me and Pat Kenny and Miles Dungan, I think. There are only a few of us. And the only time that I would say that union membership was ever of any use to me was when we were on strike, because I got 2 sets of strike pay.
Amazing.
Back in 1991.
That's amazing. Wow. Yeah. No. So I'm like kind of the same. Obviously, like Jess was saying, I do international relations and conflict studies here at Queen's. So it's definitely interesting for me. Always learning about the world around me. Always sort of keeping up with the news. So it's good to know that starting from the bottom and working your way up.
Yeah. And I'm not sure. Yeah, it's different. It's harder to get in. It's harder to break in now because there's a kind of a path from the journalism courses. Yeah. So, as an announcer now, it would be much harder to break into the newsroom than it was for me. You know?
Good. Suzanne, I'm going to direct the same question to you. What was your early journalism career like?
I always wanted to be a journalist. When I was a very, very small kid, and I talk to my own children now, and they haven't a clue what they want to be, and it sort of is really annoying. But yeah, I would have written essays. At primary school, I was on the Titanic, but I was a reporter. I didn't die, and I came from a working class Catholic household, single parent, and my mum was really unhappy that I was going to be a journalist. She was pushing, you got to do law, because law was seen as the really secure and solid career to follow. I loved, just as others have said, I loved politics, I loved English. Those were my strengths. But I got my A-level results and I hadn't applied. I'd applied to Queen's to do politics and English. I hadn't actually applied to do law, but somehow my mum worked in a shop on the Malone Road, and she knew some of the law lecturers that came in, and she somehow worked it that I even though I hadn't applied, I ended up doing law and I hated it. I lasted 1 week and it was just, I left. I had a good advisor of studies, and he said, look, you can stick at this and people do grow to like it. But if you want to do something else next year, I was the last year of grants at Queen's, there'll be no maintenance for you. But if you switch now to do English, to do politics, you'll be able to maintain your grant. And I switched, and my mum basically never spoke to me about anything at Queen's for the rest of my time here. I did a journalist course at Belfast Met College of Business Studies. It was in those days. That was for a year. I really hated the course. I think it was far too long. I don't think people need to do courses that long. And my first work experience was in the Irish News. It was the course started in September, and there was work experience at Halloween, and that cemented my love for journalism and my I knew I'd made the right decision. I just loved being in a newsroom, and I think that's where people learn far more than on any journalist course. You started out, doing what's called colour pieces. So it's Halloween, and maybe you're sent up to Casement Park just to report on the fireworks, to chat to kids, to chat to their parents. But the Irish News was great in the sense that it was a small newsroom, and you got experience. People were short-staffed, so you did end up very quickly getting experience doing other things. So this is kind of 1989, 1990. The Troubles are still on, and you would get a chance to shadow a reporter covering a murder. I remember the first time that I did that, the UDA had killed a Catholic in Rathcoole, and I went out with a journalist called Henry MacDonald, who passed away a year ago. But I watched him in operation, the questions he asked, what he asked of politicians, what he asked of police, and that is really how you learn. It's no big secret, and once you've seen it once or twice, you can do it. You can do it yourself. So I started in the Irish News, and from there I ended up being in the Irish Times, the Sunday Tribune, and I've written for the newsletter, for Sunday World, for lots of other publications as well.
That's amazing, really great core experience, and I think you mentioned that creativity, that spark. I think that's something that everyone on this table had at some point, so it's good to get started with that.
So Eileen, since you've begun your career in journalism, have you seen any progress for women going into the field, and do you kind of think there's any more improvements needed to help them break out in this sort of male-dominated area?
I'm not sure that it's male-dominated anymore. It certainly
definitely
was.
Used to be.
Yeah, it definitely used to be, but I'm not sure that it is anymore. I was just thinking about this coming up, and that thing particularly around women in sport at the moment, it says you've got to see it to be it. Well, in 1975 I left school, and that's 50 years ago, and that's the year that Margaret Thatcher became leader of the Conservative Party. And I remember I went to a convent, but the nuns were very progressive, and they sent us out to be the best that we could be. So it's 1975 up to 1974, you still had to retire from the civil service when you got married. So things were just beginning to change. But I remember sitting at home one night watching Maeve Binchy on The Late Late Show, and she's talking about Margaret Thatcher, and saying if Margaret Thatcher can do it, any woman can do it.
Wow,
any woman can be anything she wants to be. She puts her mind to it. And I think that's the mindset. I would have had the same encouragement from home. I'm lucky, I have two sisters, but my mother was one of those civil servants who had to retire when she got married in the 1950s. So she too would have pushed us out to do whatever, So, and again, I would say the same about RTE. I never felt that I was constrained because I was a woman.
Okay.
Never.
That's great.
That's really good.
Yeah, never. So, and I do think it's changed. I mean, in latter years, it's a joke that because our political correspondent was a woman, one of them, there were women being appointed to quite a few high-profile gigs, if you like, and the men were saying, "What do we have to do to get a job?" So it was almost like the tide had turned.
Flip,
Now I know it's not like that everywhere, and they're still, and this is the whole thing about the gender pay gap and all that kind of thing, which is a different issue altogether. But I personally never felt constrained because I was a woman, and I'm very proud to be able to say that.
Great to hear that. As someone who wants to go into it in Ireland, obviously, so it's nice to hear that. Claire, in Northern Ireland, have you seen anything different from Eileen's perspectives?
Oh yes. I would. I think it's a good point, and I think that's so encouraging, Eileen, to hear.
Well, I was even struck earlier when we were talking before we started this, and you were talking about your colleague Aoife that was in Dublin, and you were saying it was lovely to have another female reporter.
Absolutely.
Like I was constantly surrounded by women reporters and newscasters and stuff. So it's it's obviously different.
And I think as well, young women, Aoife's not that dissimilar in age to me, so it's always good to see younger women in those positions of a senior reporter who can lead on the big stories, and the BBC is blessed to have loads. But I mean, I've worked in different places, and certainly you have got part of it as well comes from the audience. Sometimes male audience don't want to hear a woman on the radio. They don't want to hear a younger woman on the radio. They may say that a radio presenter comes across as argumentative instead of assertive. I would say you get a lot more of that. So it's not necessarily, but that's all part of your daily work. So whether that's coming from within a team, in an office, that's not appropriate. But when people find you on social media or they find you, that's something I have to deal with more now at this part of my career than I did 10 years ago. People feel like they have an access to you. Or when you work for the BBC, you have a responsibility to TV licence payers. So you do want to serve your audience, but they expect a lot of you. And they, you know, in a space of 10 people want you to act in a different way. You can't please everybody. So I would say most of the aggressive emails or tweets, or, you know, you may get stopped in the street, that I would find is more male dominated. I mean, I've been reporting on a Peace Line live before on BBC Radio Ulster, talking about a bonfire issue. And as a radio reporter, you have to be really colourful about where you are. You know, you're almost going down to the coordinates of where you are, because you're saying, I can see this, I can hear that, I can whatever. And if people pull up in their cars straight up to you to threaten you, and I feel as a woman, at times that is incredibly, obviously intimidating. You're on your own. You put yourself out there. So I think even being in a public sphere like that, as a woman, do I worry about it more than a man? I can't speak to that. But certainly when you have yourself in threatening situations like that, probably there's elements of your journalism you need to consider as a woman. I don't post, I mean, 7 years ago I made a documentary about my daughter and postnatal depression and postnatal anxiety. I rarely talk about them now. I just don't. I feel too open in that sphere, and I just wouldn't talk about my girls the same way I would have. Maybe I was slightly more naive then, and I've changed, but I feel like the public have so much access to you now, and they have so much opinion on you. They will get out of their cars to shout abuse at you. So whether that's on a social media sphere or face to face. So perhaps 10 years ago I didn't think about that. I had my byline in the paper, I drove home, and that was it. I'd say I just feel slightly less, I feel slightly more exposed now.
Yeah, and it comes with the rise of social media as well. You know, you've access to absolutely anything at the click of a button. So it's really understandable.
Well, I think women politicians are seeing it too. I mean,
Totally.
Absolutely.
So it's not alone in that one job, but I would say
in the public eye.
In the
and
public
also,
eye.
you know, you are dealing. Day-to-day misogyny exists in every job. It just does. So you can have guests who are slightly misogynistic to you. Sometimes if I'm sat in a radio studio and we have a guest come in, the guest may address the male presenter before they address me, or they're surprised when I ask the first question. So you feel it. Whether the other person, someone might be outraged if you said, you know, you only spoke to that male presenter, but I was the female presenter there too, 50-50 parity. So you do pick up on it. Lots of ways. So yes, so Eileen, I'm delighted to hear positive experiences, but I would say
no, I avoided all that social media stuff. It has to be said, you know.
Between social media and day-to-day misogyny,
I
would say it's alive and well.
Social media is definitely an issue nowadays, even more so. But kind of along the same lines, journalism now, especially in different beats, it's long been male dominated, as we were just talking about. Can you share your experience, Stephanie, working in these spaces, and how have you earned credibility?
I don't know if I have. I just, on that really quickly, just want to jump in on that as well to say, in management top roles, and I was one of those. Luckily enough, ended up being the editor of a local paper, grand, but you know, the Inquirer is very much so, I think, if I can say so, founded by, you know, Lois and Sam, has sort of done a lot. It's very much investigative, but even at that point realising, you know, I'm an editor, and I'm in the severe minority here. What's that all about? Also, furthermore, the pay gap is huge between men and women, according to this survey that's done by DCE since last year. You know, I think it says here 49% of women journalists earn below average wage compared to 33%. So for me, it's very prevalent and it's still there and it's ongoing. And exactly like what you said, online space is horrific, actually. You know, you can't be seen to be too. You have to be warm. You have to be inviting. You have to have like a mother-like energy. God forbid you are stern or you just want to be yourself. Like, are you wearing makeup? Are you not wearing makeup? Is that too much makeup? Do you, you know, do you have your nails done? Don't you have your nails done? I don't get it nearly half as much as you must because you're public facing and like, you know, doing TV and radio, whereas, but it's brutal. How have I earned credibility? I don't know. I've just knocked down and barged through as many doors as they'd let me, and just turn up to things, and that's basically what I'm going to continue to do.
That's fair enough, though. You've got to do what you've got to do, I suppose. No, but yeah, definitely sort of. There's improvements, but kind of like still a long way to go.
Improvements, but a long way to go. Yeah, I think that management top roles stuff. Like, obviously, that sounds really inspiring. That you're, you know, political editor. Like, it's great to see that kind of stuff.
Yeah,
and it really is inspiring.
It is. Yeah, and it goes to show. It goes to show different areas as well of the country, or like different areas of journalism. You all have different experiences with all of that. So yeah.
Suzanne, I was going to direct the same question at you. Yeah.
Well, I suppose my story would be a wee bit different to Claire's. I think when it comes to ordinary people, I have never to people on the other side of the mic or the notepad. I've never experienced discrimination, and I think that's an advantage of print. Whether it's been politicians, members of the public, paramilitaries, my gender has played absolutely no role. They have been just as happy to talk to me, maybe even happier than they would be to a man. I think that just, you know, women's social skills, the way people relate to women, the way that we can ask questions in a more relaxed manner than men can. I've never found my gender a disadvantage at all, and that's even with political parties here who are on the wrong side on women's rights issues, who have, you know, at times been very sexist and very misogynist. But when it comes down to how they would relate to me personally, you know, the Reverend Ian Paisley, I had a great relationship with him. He gave me loads and loads of stories. I was in his house, I would be drinking tea with him. I got great insights, even though the DUP was an illiberal party. But generally for female journalists, yes, I think the door's open for men all the time, for men that are good, for men that are talented, for men that aren't, and many times the men don't even realise the privilege that they have. I did a journalist course. There were 16 people on it, 5 men and 11 women. All 5 men still work in journalism. I'm the only female that does. So I definitely think that there are absolutely still issues out there regarding discrimination, regarding sexism. I think the Belfast Telegraph is the first paper that in Northern Ireland that had a female editor, Gail Walker, in 2015. She appointed me political editor 2 years later. We are seeing advances in broadcast media. UTV has the very wonderful Tracy McGee as their political editor, and the equally great Vicky Hawthorne as her deputy political editor. So UTV has 2 women in what was a traditional male role. The BBC has, as a political correspondent, the very wonderful Jane McCormick, who I have no doubt will one day be political editor of BBC Northern Ireland. So there is change happening, but generally I think that there is an awful lot more progress to be made, and anybody who says that, oh, it's wonderful out there for women and there's no discrimination and it's great and there's no bias and there's prejudice, yes there is. You just don't see it. Maybe you don't see it because you're a man, but definitely does exist.
Definitely a lot happening behind the scenes, and again, progress to be made, but
amazing stories there. It's nice. I like the different experiences. It's nice to hear that RTE is it's very pro women.
Yeah, well, I mean, think back to Una Claffey. Like, how long ago is it since Una Claffey was appointed political correspondent?
Exactly.
So you know, and there have always been. Now the problem is there's a gang. Roisin Duffy, you probably know Roisin Duffy, do you, Suzanne? Roisin Duffy is involved with she's from Derry. But she's involved with a group called Women on Air, and the problem is spokespeople rather than journalists. You know, journalists and presenters. There are several women, high-profile women presenters now, but it's getting the spokespeople to be women for the various organisations. That's the work that's ongoing in Dublin at the moment.
Exactly. No, because even turning on RTE when I younger, whatever, I'm watching it. You know, you'd see Katrina Perry, you'd see Marie Crowe, like yourself, obviously. So I would say RTE is really good. But it's lovely to hear your experiences as well. Like I think it's nice you have like 4 different perspectives.
Yeah, and it's interesting. I didn't really know about like the sort of gender disparity, especially in written journalism.
Oh, terrific.
Yeah, I didn't know so much about that, but it's nice to hear.
So part of this panel is to kind of look at how you guys have overcome the challenges, and I guess one thing I want to kind of look at is burnout and how that's a growing concern. So Stephanie, what strategies have you found most effective in maintaining, you know, your mental health and your resilience?
Oh God, I don't know if you did if you know that about me, but I was actually like on a
copy on their story, have it re-nosed for later in the day, so it's moved on already. You're providing, certainly in the BBC, digital copy, radio copy, radio appearances, TV packages. The workload is certainly there. It's something I'm really, really mindful of. I think hopefully this generation coming through is also very mindful of their own mental well-being and things like that. I think I've got 2 young kids as well, aged 7 and 4. So they will, I have to be full of energy for them as well.
Yeah.
There's nothing more I hate than coming home after work at 7:30 and feeling exhausted about putting them to bed, and they are so excited to see me, and they're like, "Mommy's here." They think I'm a rock star, you know. And for me to be like, "I can't face you today," you know. And after a couple of those days, I say, "Yeah, Claire, you're doing too much. You need to take a step back." I would just encourage, if you are feeling burnt out, whether you're still a student or you're working, like Stephanie says, people around you have felt the same. Talk about it. Be really clear with your colleagues. This is too much. I'm doing too much today. And your colleagues will instantly want to help. They don't want to see you suffer. Management certainly won't want to see you suffer because the product suffers. There's no point in suffering in silence with burnout. If it takes my 2 daughters for to be my little reminders, I don't know what I'll do when they get older. But and they're not bothered anymore when I come through the door and they're just up in their rooms on like TikTok. I think just talk about it and don't be afraid to talk about it. And your colleagues hopefully will be the first ones to say, right, how can I help? But I would say it's something we have to be so wary of, because even you look at Suzanne, she could get up, you could hear her in the morning and you could still see her on TV late at night. You know, you have to be so aware of what you're doing and look around at the people around you as well. And I will see people who I know have been on the radio since the morning and they're still going to say, "All right, can I get you a glass of water? You're about to do this. When was the last time you've eaten?" And that kind of looking out for each other as well. I don't have the answers because everyone's different, but it's okay to say this is a lot on my plate. We shouldn't normalise overworking. We shouldn't normalise being completely wrecked and being up again, because it's unsustainable. And look out for each other is my top tip. And you can borrow my kids if you want for humble pie every once in a while. But when I feel like I cannot be a good mother because I have exhausted myself in work, I think, where are my priorities quite right today?
Yeah.
That's about it.
Yeah.
A couple of things spring to mind, I suppose. I mean, just listening to you, there's the old thing too, you never walk off a story though.
Yeah.
And so we would have, you know, there are times, and there would be people who got away with it, walking out the door, say, after the 6 o'clock news and not do the 9 o'clock news.
Yeah.
And we'd be given out about that you just don't walk off a story. But the other side of it is then you end up working from 8 o'clock in the morning until midnight on that same story. I think where I felt it most was during COVID.
Yeah.
Because there were fewer people in the newsroom.
Yeah.
It was all very scary anyway. Every time you went in, the protocols had changed and all of that, so it was just a very tense time. And then it was so busy because it was coming at you from all quarters. I mean, there was the health story, there was the political story, there was the international story. It was just, you couldn't take your eyes off it. I mean, it's like, God love the poor journalist working in the White House press room at the moment. You just can't switch off, you know. But it was a bit like that, and I just remember coming home having done 3 Friday, Saturday, Sunday really long shifts one Sunday night, and of course my poor husband was at home all day talking to nobody. He hadn't seen anyone all weekend either. And when I walked in the door, he just hit me. I was looking forward, I knew, Sunday night, don't have to work tomorrow. There's a bottle of white wine in the fridge, and there's a nice concert on Sky Arts, and I was coming home just to relax and watch the concert. And I arrived into him and he's up full of it, watching Trump on CNN, and I just burst into tears. I said, "Mother, I cannot take any more of this. If you don't turn off that television, I'm going to bed. I just can't take any more." So yeah, I've always been good at switching off though. I'll leave the phone at home and I'll go for a walk down the seafront in Clontarf and nobody knows where I am. I've always been good at that.
It's good having places.
And I think it's essential sometimes just to allow yourself that, or you're off on a Monday, go to the cinema in the afternoon where nobody can get you, switch off the phone. You know, something. That's how I deal with it. How do you?
I don't switch off, I suppose, because we work late hours, we work weekends, so I'm pestering politicians at all times of the day when it's not kind of convenient for them, and I expect them to answer the phone, or my news desk is looking for a line, or they want something. So because I expect other people to be available to me at all hours, I'm sort of available to them most of the time, so I don't really have this line between work and leisure time. In terms of burnout, I think that it wasn't it's not an issue, certainly when I was younger, when you don't have kids, and also the job was an awful lot easier then, as other people have said. It's much more demanding now, in both print and in broadcast media. The demands just grow and grow. I think an easier time, I worked for the Sunday Tribune as Northern editor, and I had my first child there, and working for a Sunday paper, it's, you know, you can really kind of make your own hours. You can work 18 hours in one day if you want, and no hours the next day. It's just really flexible. I was entitled to 3 months maternity. I only took three weeks, and I went back, and I was happy to do that, because of that flexibility. But you know, there's jobs that they're simply that the flexibility doesn't exist. So yeah, Eileen's talking about COVID. You know, I remember my youngest daughter was coming up to the transfer test, and I'm meant to be homeschooling, and it was just a nightmare. At one point, like for several months, I just said, Saoirse, no, we're not doing anything, just can be behind, because it was really difficult, really hard time. And I think it isn't just children. Some of us have caring responsibilities as well, for elderly relatives, and if you have both the children and the caring responsibilities, then you know, life is an absolute nightmare. I don't have the answers. I suppose my two W's to get me through the day is walking and wine. I'll finish late at night, and you know, unless I'm doing something broadcast media, I'll just take myself out with a torch for a really long walk for an hour and a half, and then there'll be the white wine as well. And the health benefits of the walking are probably very much negated by the wine, but yeah, it's just about getting through the day.
It's always nice to have something to look forward to after a really long day. That's absolutely true. Yeah. Just sort of along the same lines, and I will open this up to the floor as well. Journalism is obviously, as we've spoken about, quite demanding and tough at times. What has been one of your most challenging moments in your professional journey? I'll start with Stephanie at the end of the table.
Stephanie's getting
all the first questions.
I think I have to say COVID as well. So I was given this fabulous opportunity to step up and basically be the editor of this probably little known, especially up here now, local newspaper called the Dublin Inquirer, which is sort of like an independent, subscription-based, investigative newspaper. And I got the job, and I started in February in 2020, and it just like was I just couldn't believe it. This paper is all about shoe leather reporting, which was what I love about it. So it's 3 stories a week, shoe leather. It's, you have a beat and you need to go out and you can't be in the office, and it's all very sort of trying to cultivate that, and all that just went out the window. So I'm managing a team of journalists who I've never met. I'm trying to come up with stories based very much so in local communities that I can't go to, and because the paper is so small, I'm also the operations manager, the social media manager, the fucking like distribution manager, the face, the voice, everything. God, yeah. Some nights on editing days on the Tuesday, I'm not ashamed to admit, well maybe I am a bit, but like I would do probably about maybe 18 to
definitely was so hard for so many
horrific.
people. Yeah, for sure.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I don't want to go next. I'm still thinking. It's a tough one. It is a tough one.
Yeah, there've been a lot of challenges. Journalism is just, it's a privilege a lot of the time to do this job. There's a huge amount of high points, but there's a lot of low points in your career too. Low points either in terms of how you're being treated, low points in terms of I was pregnant with my second daughter, heavily pregnant, and the Sunday Tribune that I worked for went into liquidation, and it just closed literally overnight, and there was no money, and it's far from ideal. When you're pregnant, I had a beloved aunt had died as well, and times like that it's just really difficult. But yeah, I've had some very challenging times during my career, but I would have to say, in terms of being negative about some things, there's also some good people out there. There's people there and men there that really helped me along my career. I was a young reporter, and I was, in my early 20s, and I was brought into the Irish Times by a guy called Mark Brennock. He was the northern editor of the Irish Times, and when you kind of go from a local paper to the Irish Times, and it just, there's a lot of status there. It was a really good opportunity I got. Before social media, there were kind of, you had papers where there was just really one set of political opinions. There was a magazine here called Fortnight magazine, and it would have, it was called Fortnight, but it came out every month, and it would have a range of different unionist, nationalist, loyalist, left-wing, right-wing, and it was a newsy but also academic. And again, I was in my early 20s, and the editor there, a guy called Robin Wilson, he was looking for somebody to be their northern political columnist. They had Emily O'Reilly as the southern political columnist, and there was loads of people who were much more experienced than me, had a lot more under their belt. But he asked me to do it, and again, that hugely helped. So there are people, and there are men who have been really helpful too. Whereas in one place I worked in my early years, there was a female news editor, and she was sending me out on a job, booking me for the job a few days later, and the job, it was on a Sunday. It was to go to Clonard Monastery to report on something that was happening there, and she said to me, "Now you'll have to wear a skirt." And I was absolutely appalled, and I went to speak to a man who was also on the news desk, who was involved in the NUJ, and he would never have asked me to do that, but he just said, "She's asked you to, you should." And I didn't know what to do, because I depended on this woman to give me shifts. And much to my own shame, I didn't wear a skirt, but I brought a skirt in a plastic bag that day with me. She wasn't there, and I didn't wear it. But something like that, you should never be put in a position of having to do that. And there was nobody to turn to. You went to the NUJ and said that, they would have told you to get lost. They wouldn't have been interested in that. And so times have changed, but it isn't always the case that it's other women that are good, and that they look out for you, and the men are all bad. It's not as simple as that.
There's backstabbing everywhere. But I suppose it's why we're here today. People were good to us on the way up, so if we can pass on any little bit of advice or experience, we're happy to do so.
It's brilliant. No, just on the same question, does anyone else have any sort of experiences?
I mean, I think every day in journalism is challenging. You start with a brief, and you've got really high expectations of yourself, and you have to get through it. You're dealing with logistical nightmares of how to travel places and do things. But I'll tell, probably as well, this isn't really a challenge, but I can't think of a different story. But I remember when I was 6 months pregnant with my first daughter, and there was a terror attack in La Rambla in Barcelona, and my boss, who was amazing, said, when there was international stories, you would have to travel with it. So we lived in Manchester at the time. I was 26, and you always had your passport in your bag just in case, because at that time, 2016, 2017, there was lots of Brexit things going on, so sometimes you have to go to Brussels or down to London or whatever, so you're always prepared, toothbrush and passport in your bag just in case. And but obviously I had a bump to hear, and you know, quite open in the office about how uncomfortable I was finding this pregnancy. So, but I was on shift, and my boss came to me and said, Claire, we'd love you to go. We don't want you to feel any pressure, but we'd love you to go. And in my head I thought, of course I'm going. And when you are a young journalist, you're hungry for the opportunities and you want to go. One of the biggest challenges was picking up the phone and calling my husband and letting him know I was taking me and my baby to a terror zone in Barcelona. They still hadn't found the attacker. It had gone into lockdown. He was on the run in Cabril. It was to pick up the phone and say, I'm going to do this. And I think sometimes it's just always a challenge thinking to myself, am I put my family first, or do I want to put my job first, or am I going to be, I want to go and do this. There was conflicts in your head of who you're going to let down. And just hearing his voice and then, where are you taking our baby? And I say, we're just going to, but we're blessed. I'm a blessed journalist in that I've come into journalism in Northern Ireland after you have journalists who've come before you who didn't think twice about going into places which have just had horrific atrocities take place, you know, where there was an incredibly worrying, alarming security situation. So I'm thinking to myself, well, this is nothing compared to what, you know, so I appreciate all the journalists who've come before us, laying the ground in those situations, and probably their kids and all of that, managing all that in their minds. So the challenge there was thinking to yourself, am I not putting my family first? Am I putting myself first? Am I putting my job first? Do I want to go and do this? Do I think I'd be helpful in the situation? I speak Spanish, of course, I'm helpful for this, you know, this is a good thing for me to do in my work day. I'd say my challenge constantly is just work, life, and making those decisions and not feeling bad about it. I love my job, I have to say that. You couldn't be a journalist if you didn't love it, because you just, it's too hard, it's too all-consuming. As Suzanne says, the news cycle never stops. There's huge expectations of you. Your natural interest and instinct keeps you going in and going, oh, what's the story behind that? What's really happened here? That's what keeps you going. So I have to say I love my job, and if it was so challenging in my day-to-day, you couldn't do it. You'd have to love it to keep turning up every day and seeing what's new, what's fresh, what's coming out of America, what's whatever. For me, it's always just work-life balance, and am I making the right decision here? Particularly when you're 6 months pregnant.
It's so important.
And heading off, but it is important. It's an important job to go and be there and do the job. And even if you are a woman, I need to remind myself that all the time, that yes, you have a family, or I have my kids young by today's standards, that you still have a job to do. And there's a reason why I wanted to be a journalist, and you do just have to be kinder to yourself.
Definitely, it's so important just to make sure that you're putting yourself first when you need to.
When you need to, and then, as you say, just reminding yourself what is important at the end of the day.
Can I say, being on the other side of it now, and sometimes you don't even realise the pressure you're under. Myself and Anne Doyle often have this conversation, that you don't have to read all the papers every Sunday anymore, because you're going in on Monday and you might only have a 2-minute interview on the 9 o'clock news, but you could still ask the stupid question. So you need to be on top of everything, because you don't know what's going to come up and hit you in any bulletin. So it's now, you know, it could be Wednesday and I can still be reading the Sunday Times, and that's fine. So that's but you still find yourself. I mean, I swore I wasn't going to get sucked in this time on the Trump, because I would have been 8 years ago. But you wake up every morning, you can't help it. I mean, you can't avoid it.
There's no avoiding him.
But even that shooting of Trump during on his ear. And I said to Will, my husband, I said to him, I'll be up. Are you going up to bed? I'll be up in 10 minutes. 4 hours later, you're still watching the coverage. You can't take your eyes off it.
It's unprecedented times nowadays.
But you
I would like some precedented.
Just on this panel, we're talking sort of a bit about the changing media landscape and sort of online especially. I think we touched on it briefly earlier, but online harassment is a growing issue, especially for female journalists. Again, to the floor, have any of you experienced it, and sort of how do you think that the industry should address this?
I'll start it because I never engaged. I have never tweeted in my life. I don't do Facebook at all. They put me on Instagram when I was doing Dancing with the Stars because all the dancers are on Instagram, so that was a different thing. That was gentler. But it didn't just start to happen with online. We used to get, anonymous letters written on jotter papers in brown envelopes, and so you just throw them in the bin, And it was actually Anne got one. Anne and I co-presented the 9 o'clock news at one stage, and I was getting these vile letters from some guy, and I would just take them and tear them up and throw them in the bin. And then she got one. What are you doing presenting with that? And she brought it to management, and then they investigated it, and it turned out to be somebody in the post office. They traced it back to someone in the post office. And then there was a guy that used to turn up at the studio, so I used to have to be escorted to my car sometimes. So it didn't just start with the internet. That's all I want to say. It's always been there.
That's really not good.
Very much like yourself, Claire. I've been lucky enough. I think I say lucky enough. I mean, I only get called a communist rat in my tweets, but no, genuinely, I think I have been lucky enough. My colleague, Shamim Malekmium, who covers the immigration beat down in Dublin, she's kind of the only journalist who covers that sort of specific beat. And obviously we've seen this rise of anti-immigrant sentiment, and what she has to go through every single day is horrific, to the point, you can't really use your social media accounts. Everything's just locked down, to worrying that people are going to find out where your offices are, and I think it is, men get it too, of course, but I do think that much like we see, violence against women, and domestic violence and stuff like that, like it is gendered. Again, a study was done by DCU last year, talking to this, saying that it's overwhelmingly gendered, online harassment and in real world harassment, of women specifically in news. I don't know why it's happening, but it does, and I think you just need to be careful, really careful. Like, just be really, really careful about what you're posting. Don't reveal too much about your personal life, where you live. Kind of don't fall into those kind of traps, maybe, like, you don't need to post every minute of your day. Although I did that today, so.
But
we practice what we preach.
They can't get you.
Yeah. I don't know, but it's horrible that we have to restrict ourselves because some weirdo with is sending mad letters.
I think it's also normalised online now, like you were saying, just to post everything that you're doing.
Yes.
Like maybe, to impress people, like,
too much,
like I'm doing this today and I woke up at this time. Like, no one needs to know everything.
No, that's what I was going to say. Like, why would you be posting every minute of every day?
But I think it's like, you see Molly May Haig, and she will say, she reads them all. She reads all her DMs. She reads all the comments. She reads whatever. And as Suzanne said earlier, sometimes you can have people in the industry who really bring you up. And Declan Harvey, he's our BBC Newsline presenter, BBC Evening Extra presenter. We love Declan. I said to him once about the comments or whatever, and he said, Claire, you don't need to read them. You don't need to read them. They don't need to be your internal voice. You're in charge of that. And when it comes to that, that's the advice that I took from him. I don't need to be so brave that I can read them, not be offended. That's a big ask of someone. If an attack on you, to evidence saying you don't have to. You know, if you feel that you don't have to do that.
Even your ex-colleague, you know, that was the one that really woke me up a bit in a big way. Eve Grace Moore. I mean, she had just an incident a few years ago. I don't know if you followed that, but it was just a sustained attack on of sexual aggressiveness, essentially, just on her relentlessly, and it just blew my mind actually how bad it was. I'd never seen anything quite like it. Sorry, just
no, but
that one came to mind.
And in that way, you can't avoid it. You know, there's some things you just simply can't avoid. But I try and do as much as I can now to protect myself. I was the social media reporter for the elections last summer. So I was on my phone all the time, just putting things on social media all the time. So September came and I deleted all my apps. After that summer, I just said, I don't even want social media near me. I don't need it. I thought I needed it. I thought I need it for work. I need it for work. I didn't. I absolutely didn't. I just was able to get rid of it, get the voices out of my head. I didn't want other people's voices to be my internal voices. So I just got rid of it for a while. I'm back on now, but in a very measured, selected time. And like I said, I won't read any of the commentary coming into the BBC. Eileen says if someone posts you a letter and lets you know what they think of you, you open it up. You can't avoid it. Any situation I can avoid, I will.
Yeah, and it's so easy to be sucked into social media nowadays, and it's such a useful tool. But it's really easy to get sort of bogged down in that.
You just have to decide how much of a use is it to you, really. Is it useful to be put down in your, in your professional performance, or is it useful to, if someone sends, Claire, you'll love this, and they'll send it to me. Great,
Brilliant.
I don't need to scroll through all the nonsense to then, as a result, constantly see, how you look, how you sound, what you're saying.
Yeah, exactly.
Well, you were just saying that how much is social media, the rise of misinformation caused by social media. Do you guys have any advice on how to maintain credibility and how to, advice for future journalists on how to stay away from this and cite your sources, and what do we think?
Well, I was saying earlier before we started, the last Trump administration saved the New York Times for a start, because this whole fake news and disinformation, and people went back to trusted sources. And I think during COVID too, people tuned into RTE. They went to the places where they knew they would get genuine information. But AI, which we're probably going to come on to, that's distorting everything now. So it's just harder and harder to recognise what is false and what is truth. But I think the old adage of having two sources and corroborating your sources, that's going to come more and more into play. Or do people care anymore?
That's the question, because I think with Twitter, you can put anything out there, and you do see this rise of people believing it, and they will cite their source as being Twitter, which
it's not
the reliable source. So Claire, what do you kind of think on that?
It's a bear trap, isn't it? But I think for the last 10 years I've looked at things, is that real? It's not just in the last 18 months. You'll see things and say, is that real? Are they really saying that? And I think, probably Suzanne, you probably rely on your own sources to fact check things, to look at things. If it's too good to be true, it probably isn't real. I'm sure universities now are versing their students and their graduates on how to identify these things. I went to Belfast Met to do my journalism. It certainly wasn't even mentioned in a module, no artificial intelligence or anything like that. I find now though, it's so important to be able to pick up the phone, and what I would worry is that it's not that our new journalists coming through aren't used to communicating directly with people, but they rely on a screen to tell them everything, so they believe everything on a screen. I still think the best way to find out if something's real or not, pick up the phone and call someone and do it that way, and speak directly to people. And even if you're, instead of messaging someone on a DM, how do you really know if that person is the person you need to be speaking to at the end of it? So even when you're sourcing things, don't rely on technology. Meet someone for a coffee. Don't rush it. Pick up the phone. people looking up from your phone and looking around you and identifying stories around you. And there's probably an onus on journalists to be aware of what's real and what's fake, but I don't think that has changed. You know, for the last however long, you were still checking if things were real or fake. It's just in a different sphere now.
Yeah.
You'd probably be more worried that a robot's going to take your job, other than trick you on a job. But that's a whole different conversation altogether.
What I always say is, you know, everything that Claire says, cooperate, and Eileen, like, just cooperate everything. I always think if you are identifying yourself on a social media platform as a journalist, so if that's like in your bio, you need to be 100% positive that everything you're retweeting is factual. And how to do that is, I think, really simple. Like, you know, you see a video, you see a story, you check the website, and you just do a quick Google search, and you see if it's actually turning up in other places. And if it's not, then you can't wholeheartedly get behind that and retweet it. There's no magic formula, I think, other than just having to do your research, which is what we're trained to do. There's no easy thing. You can't put it through some sort of checker. You just have to bare bones Google, is it turning up somewhere else? Is this a reputable source? And also think that, you know, sometimes journalists, we spread misinformation, you know, unknowingly. You know, it's an unfortunate part of our profession. You know, sometimes you retweet a story by the Irish Times and you realise a year later, Jesus, that was a bit of misinformation. Where'd that come from? So I think it's impossible to, you know, like, you know, you do your two sources and you double, triple check, and that's what I'd say.
Great, yeah. So I think what we'll do now, thank you so much for all of that advice. You know, personally, I think it's very beneficial. I think we'll open the floor to the audience for any questions they might have for the industry. If anyone has any questions. Yeah.
What would kind of be your biggest tip for people trying to break into the industry and things to be mindful of?
It's very, very tough. There are far too many journalist courses out there. There's far too many people in them. There aren't the jobs for all those people. If you do a journalist course, the media course, the key is your work experience and is being placed with an employer and impressing that employer when you're there. But don't do it unless you absolutely love it, unless you feel that you'll die if you're not a journalist. It was always tough, but it's much, much harder now. I think, you know, when I was starting out in the early 90s, there were far more opportunities than there are now. I think in terms of working conditions, in terms of pay, things have changed and not for the better. So don't do it unless you absolutely, really, really want to do it and are completely driven to do it. And the very fact that you see such a big exodus, especially as people are older, in their 40s and in their 50s, from journalism, and you see people get into comms and things like that because of the stresses of the job and because the money isn't good, basically. So don't do it unless you're really, really driven.
Yeah, I think, as we were saying earlier, the demands on journalists now are far more. I mean, back in the day, you had one story, you had one deadline, you filed your story. I'm involved with a group called the Association of European Journalists, and we have lunches maybe once a month, once every 6 weeks in Dublin. So back in the day, everybody, you know, would have had their story filed before they come to lunch and be gone for the afternoon. But the younger journalists can't do it because they've got about 3 or 4 deadlines. So we're finding it more and more difficult to recruit younger journalists because they just don't have the time. And again, with the work-life balance, whereas I would have gone to something like that on my day off, people are not prepared to do that anymore either. I would have seen it as a way to network and to meet people because I was studio-based. So I wasn't out on the beat, you know, meeting other journalists as much. So I found it invaluable, and I ended up president of the International Association, so I got an awful lot out of it. but I had to invest in it as well. And so yeah, you need to be doué, as they say in French. You need to really want to do it, but also there are fewer people. There are fewer, the opportunities aren't there, but there are fewer journalists being employed by all the organisations. There are cutbacks everywhere. How many outlets now have Brussels correspondents? A lot of the people are just sitting at home, taking it off the website or whatever. They do a daily press conference in Brussels. Our guys will tell you that the room is shrinking all the time. There are fewer and fewer of them there. There are fewer, we were talking about it earlier, there are fewer sub-editors. You input your stuff directly online now, so you file a story today and you say the Taoiseach said yesterday, and it'll come up tomorrow morning saying the Taoiseach said yesterday, when it's, whatever, or the Taoiseach said today. There's nobody, we always had somebody coming behind us to correct us. That's not happening anymore either. So you've got extra responsibility and extra work.
You used to have, you used to have much more time to kind of just really go out and engross yourself in a story and meet people and mull over the information they gave you, to do a feature. Maybe you would have a few days. That just doesn't exist anymore. Everything needs to be turned over really, really quickly, and that's a very, very big issue. So I think journalism, you don't get the time to enjoy it the way that you could have enjoyed pursuing a story before. And lots of people will contact you, maybe on Twitter and things, and people will be saying, I want to meet you to tell you A, B and C, and you're going, I don't have time to meet you, because you need to file your copy that day. You have to have stories. Nobody's given you 2 or 3 days to go off and pursue something. It just doesn't happen.
You go. I would say, just to counter a little bit, it is really hard, but right, there are fun elements, and you can always freelance, or maybe if you don't want to do politics or you don't want to do current affairs, I know there's a lot of people who are interested in features, colour writing, gig reviews. I spent 2 years in hot press, absolutely loved it. I would say networking. It is one thing I didn't do in college. I was scarlet. I also, again, and not to say always bring it back to class, but I always bring it back to class. I was I didn't actually understand what networking was. I thought it was a really cringy thing. And I realised after viewing people who are from more affluent backgrounds, that just is second nature to them, and it's not cringy. And it took me a surprisingly, embarrassingly long time to realise that. So I tell everyone now, network with anyone who's interested in being a journalist around you. Be humble, be nice. Don't be the asshole student journalist who thinks they're all that, because no one's going to want to work with you, and in 5 years' time you're going to be the student editor that no one liked, and someone else is going to be in a job and they're not going to hire you. So don't act like you're all that. I see that happen sometimes in student media. It happens in journalism too. Be humble, be professional, be nice. Also, don't worry about being a waitress for 5 years and calling yourself a journalist in your Twitter bio. Don't count yourself out just because you're not full-time employed. Don't count yourself out because you're not part-time employed. Don't count yourself out because you haven't written an article in 6 months. Grind, do pitch, journalist in bio, waitress in reality.
Everything is an opportunity, and everything is chalking up to experience. Yeah. And it is a fabulous profession, and no 2 days are ever the same.
Yeah,
you could be sitting in, I was going to be a teacher. I'd be coming home at 5 o'clock every evening. Okay, my son might have been delighted to see me coming through the door, but you go into work, and we all go into work in the morning. You just don't know what's going to hit you when you go in that door, and that's fascinating. And suddenly you're caught up in the buzz of a story. There is nothing like it when a big story breaks, and you're part of it. Yeah.
I think work experience, and also lots of people might say, and you might say, what's your dream job? And you might say, I want to work for Sky, or I want to work for RT, or I want to work for the BBC, or wherever you are. But to go into those big organisations, they really want to see that you want to be there. They really want to see that you have a real strong interest. So whether it is in news or in sport, or whether it's in, as you were saying, gig writing or features, a passion for something. My passion was always people, and I love telling stories, and I love hearing stories. I could sit and listen. Sometimes I'm on the radio and someone will finish speaking and I forget to speak, because I'm just sitting there going, oh jeez, but there's nothing happening because I'm not talking. I need to start speaking again, because I love listening to people's stories. If you like listening to the radio, and if you watch the news, things mean that journalism is a path that you should consider. But if you're not fussed about listening to the radio, if you don't know what's happening in the news that day, and you don't really care, then I would say it's such a brutal career to be in that it's probably not going to be your natural fit. But I would say work experience will help you figure that out. If you come out of a newsroom and you've spent the day with a journalist, you thought, wow, that was a lot of fun. I say try it. Just try it. And I went into journalism, had a degree, but I went back to college then. I went to the Met, did the year journalism there. But within that, you had to work for free every Friday. So I went into the Belfast Telegraph and I went into City Beat, which is now Q Radio. And those places are where I learned my skills and how to talk to people and make a terrible vox and write, to get better and better and better and better to the point where then you can go to an employer after 2-3 years and say, I've grafted and I've been a waitress every weekend while doing this at the same time. And it's not glamorous in the beginning. I went to the BAFTAs last weekend to cover Kneecap's success at the BAFTAs.
Yeah.
And on Good Morning Ulster the next morning, and I went to bed at 2:30 because my radio pieces wouldn't cut and there was no Wi-Fi at the hotel. I won't get into the drama of it, but let's just say. Then I got a call from the newsroom in the morning saying, Claire, could you come on and speak to us again? Because whatever reason. And I said, yeah, that's no bother. I'm just going to run downstairs and I have no makeup on, the hair's on top of my head and a bun, and I'll go out and speak to you. And the presenters on air, Sarah Brett and Mark Simpson, and she said, well, did you have a good night, Claire? I said, yes, I've still got my party dress on and I've had a fabulous night. Thinking, no, I have not. I've just gotten about 4 hours sleep. I had 2 cereal bars for my dinner. And then they said, well, but did you have a good night? I said, yeah, Ariana Grande was doing her mascara in the bathrooms next to me. Was she? No. I was frantically writing my copy and trying to film something for the 10:30 news. And you just have to be honest with yourself. It looks glamorous, can sound glamorous. Lots of it is not glamorous. So my advice is get some work experience. Go to different places and do work experience in different places, and see and learn and listen, because those people will have so much good advice. But as Suzanne said, even on your first story going out, listen to how people talk to people. Listen to how people make phone calls. Listen how you go in and you talk to the local taxi driver or the shopkeeper. What's just happened here and who's been involved in this, and find your way. Learn from others around you. But my advice is, don't be shy about asking for opportunities. But it is not glamorous. It just isn't. So when you think you're doing your mascara beside Ariana Grande in the bathrooms, you're not. You're sat on the red carpet outside writing you're not strutting down the red carpet, you're sat on it trying to scribble something down to keep all your teams happy at home. But just go in and see how you feel about it. Don't be scared of it. It's not an industry you have to suddenly arrive into. Get into it, see how you feel in it, and if you feel happy and it's giving you a buzz at the end of the day, you're in the right place. If it's not giving you a buzz, it will, honestly, it'll exhaust you. It will, and your skills will be better elsewhere. But I would say give it a go, but see it for how it is. Just see it for how it is. If that helps.
It's brilliant, yeah. Really good advice.
Yeah, great advice.
Yeah.
I learned a lot from that.
Yeah, no, definitely. I didn't know any of that.
Can I just, get really good at videos, long, vertical videos. You're all so young, and it's the thing where I'm always saying this to the younger ones, little TikTok 1-minute videos. It's what the newsrooms want to hire your generation for. Go out in the street, make an engaging minute-long video full of content.
But then not
post
everyone
on
feels
TikTok.
comfortable doing that.
I know.
Not everyone feels comfortable doing that, and I think
the younger kids are being thrown into that now.
But we have to do so much. There are definitely parts of my day I prefer doing to the other parts of my day. There's definitely parts of my job I find easier, and you don't need to love every element.
Oh,
but
God, no.
lots of
Do
people
not want to be in front of the camera.
would rather die than just stand there talking about that, and you can see it all. They feel deeply uncomfortable about it.
But that's what I'm saying. Even with the Instagram, all the dancers, when I was doing Dancing with the Stars last year, they're at that all the time too.
Yeah.
And I'm sure ye all are too. It's just a different generational thing.
Yeah.
But it's now expected, and that's why, to your point, Suzanne, about people in their 40s and 50s leaving, I think it's because those extra demands are being put on people now, and it's not something we're comfortable with. It's not something we grew up with. Whereas to you, it's part of your everyday life.
We filmed one.
We filmed literally just before.
We did this. We couldn't take ourselves seriously.
No, we just
had to record
said you need a video that now, a minute, I'd be like, right, well, this is all you're getting. It doesn't matter if I've got my makeup on or not. I would just have to go because that is such the demands on you. There'd be no 3 takes. There'd be no and there'd be no highlighter thrown on. You know, bit of lipstick and you're away. You know. That's the reality of it. But yeah, that's my 2 cents on selfie videos, which are so important. I get it.
They are. I mean, even RTE recently, I don't know if you saw, but their internship scheme for this year closed now, but it was last week, and I was helping some students, and they didn't want a CV, they wanted a minute-long video.
Wow.
Really?
Recorded vertically on your phone.
Although I've seen Conor McCauley for RTE, well, the way they would, if he's live somewhere at a scene and he would have his phone up and you can see, you know, the way it's done with RTE and they reflect it back and it looks all very clever, very smart. I haven't tried that out yet, but I'm going to roll that from Conor McCauley.
Because you're in the trade.
I'm noticing that. And that's a selfie video just showing you around a scene. So in some ways, that's easier than waiting on your camera to send footage back. Your camera
It's at the tip of your fingers as well. I mean, everyone carries their phone around everywhere, so it is pretty easy if you wanted to do that, just to do it immediately.
Yeah, another question.
Claire said something lovely there about having passion for journalism and not being like such a necessity in the field. Is there anyone else that would have any like attributes that they think are necessary? I know, like Stephanie, you said you do a bit of lecturing. Is there anything that you think that students, something that catches your eye in a particular student, any attribute that you think?
I think actually Claire said it as well. I think it's about bedside manner. Actually, we were talking earlier about like someone, and I think actually like a bit of personality I find can go quite a long way. Be yourself, but like, you know, don't be. It's so cliched, but genuinely I do feel like it's an industry of people, and it's very much so. You have to kind of just be confident in yourself, and not Scarlett, I would say charisma and the ability to walk up to someone like Suzanne and just shake her hand and say, do you know what I mean? Like that. I really think that tenacity and charisma goes hand in hand almost in these days with, you know, the ability to research and the ability to write well and the ability to communicate well. I think, there's a bedside manner element to journalism that I think about more and more.
Don't be bland.
Yeah.
I would say just don't be bland. I mean, I know, you know, I curse and swear, and I'm the same. I don't change that when I'm talking to Jim Alistair or whoever. I'm just me, and I think that people can suss whether you're authentic or you're fake, and they prefer authenticity, even if maybe there's parts of it they find distasteful, but they actually prefer that. And just to be a journalist, the first thing is you need to be nosy. And you also need to listen. Sometimes people like the sound of their own voices more than they actually like listening to other people. We're there first and foremost to listen, to tell their stories. It's not about us, it's about them.
I think that's a danger. People becoming personalities and thinking that they're personalities. I've always said that and maintained that in the way I would have dressed, in the way I would have done everything to do with newscasting. I'm the messenger here. It is not about me. I'm just communicating a message, and it's for people to be able to identify with that and empathize. Empathy maybe, but you should never know how I feel about the story I'm reporting on either, because there's all that objectivity piece. But
do you find that hard to keep impartial all the time?
Yes, and I think it's becoming harder. And we had a session, I spoke about this at another event we were at. I'm involved with the Kennedy Summer School, and we had a bunch of younger journalists down, and they were talking about that and the pressure they're under to tweet and to voice opinions. But then supposing the government changes next year and it's all turned on its head, you need to be very, very careful. You just need to be very careful and keep that objectivity. So that's the danger with going online and expressing opinions. You can't. There was one guy that I was very, very fond of, and I could see him doing it, and I just said, just be careful, you're going to walk yourself into trouble. And he hated me saying it to him, but came back subsequently and said, you were right. It's very dangerous, isn't it?
I think the line does sort of get blurred when you are writing news and when you're writing comment and opinion. I do both in my job. I do news, which is, you know, it's purely objective, but I also write a column in which I give my opinions. So, you know, it isn't all straightforward now. and you know, so you when you're writing news, has to be 100% objective. It is not what you think, but when you're writing your column, you do give your opinion.
Has
So
that impacted you professionally, Suzanne?
I think you have to sort of balance it out in the sense that, you know, if you were just going after one political party or one viewpoint constantly all the time, then it's going to hurt you, because you're going to, you know, those people, you need everybody to pick up the phone to you, because the journalist's only as good as their sources. So you can maybe piss off a few individuals in the party, but you can't piss off them all, because you need to have your stories informed. In the round, I think, you know, if politicians feel that you're being fair and that you're not just on a witch hunt against one party or one group, then they mightn't like it. They get a touch one week, they won't like it, but they will understand if they think that you're fair generally, and they know the heat's on us this week, next week it's going to be on somebody else.
Piss everyone off equally.
Yeah.
But it's like Eileen says, you're not the story, so it doesn't really matter what you think. People deserve to know the facts and what's happened here, and they don't care what I think, really. You know, they don't need to hear it unless I think it's important for them to hear. So I don't think impartiality is a tricky thing to maintain.
I do think it is, for me personally.
You've probably got better opinions than me.
No, but if you're hired to write an opinion column, it's
it's
different. And there are more and more, but that's the thing too. There are more and more. Pick up any paper now. There are more opinion columns in it than there are straight news reports.
I think Gen Z are like, and I'm sorry to talk about your generation to you, but like I feel like your generation are a lot more involved in social justice issues and like have opinions on things. Like for me, when repeal was happening, like I was like, I cannot not go to march for a woman's right to choose. I will not go to these marches, and I will not go to things and turn up, and like that was just something that I decided that.
Well, you see, I on the other hand never went to any march of any description,
and I've never done it before.
And I still find it hard if I'm asked my opinion, because I'm checking myself all the time.
I don't think you do your like 4-year degree, or you complete your like work experience in the Irish Times, and then like there's an objectivity one that just gets like I know that we were trained, and I know that we have all these filters, but I really struggle with it, and I feel like the future is up for debate, and the boundaries are porous with what audiences actually want from their journalists. I think maybe it's going. I think it's in play whether people want the true objective mainstream sort of like almost corporate journalist
vanilla,
or if they want the more kind of you can kind of tell maybe they're kind of going that way. I think it's up for debate, and people say that this idea of objectivity actually is a farce, and that not questioning dominant power structures and not questioning
That's not the same thing. I would say that's not the same thing.
Is upholding these things, like as in like mainstream news media can sometimes just actually present objective, but it's not.
Sometimes
in
coverage of the conflict, the people who said they were the most objective and presented, they actually weren't, because they were embedded in the status quo, and they all had a very, very similar worldview. So I don't accept people's self-definitions all the time either.
But then we need to be careful. Do we want to end up with like a CNN Fox?
I know.
You know.
I know.
So you tune into CNN, you are only getting one side of the argument. You tune into Fox, you are only getting the other side of the argument. So there has to be a middle ground where at least you.
Yeah, I agree.
You know, you give yourself a chance to be well informed.
Yeah.
Nobody's well informed by watching CNN or Fox. You know, you're not informed in the round.
I think it's just more porous these days. I think people can choose. So they can do a bit of CNN, they can do a bit of RTE, they can go to the ditch, or they can go to Gript, and they sort of put it together that way.
But unfortunately, a lot of people don't.
Yeah.
Great. Yeah, very good. My kind of dream is to go into film journalism, but I would love written. But my cousin I know is in the BBC doing broadcast journalism, for film. So I was just wondering
To be a photojournalist, you mean?
Like a broadcast versus written.
You have to be it all. That is my advice.
Yeah.
Now
I mean, if you're a broadcaster, you still have to write.
and you're writing scripts.
Yeah.
And I personally don't think you can divide the two anymore. I think the lines are so blurred now. If you're making something for TV or film, you know, your online platforms are still going to want a written form version of it. When you're writing your script for your film, it's all written down first anyways. Why would you not like to do print journalism?
Oh no, I would like to go into written.
You'd like to go into written?
But I'm
you feel like you'd
a bit similar to Stephanie. I think I would not like to be in front of the camera.
Yeah. Well, the thing is though, you see one person in front of the camera, but you know, there's a lot of people, not a lot, that's generous.
Yeah, there used to be.
But there are producers around that team who put it together, and some of the best journalists are those people, you know, and digging those stories, who don't want to front it themselves, and that's just always make sure you get the byline. That's you know, you may and I think there's definitely a space for that. I don't think everyone should have to be. But this is what I'm saying about everyone's comfortable doing a minute video, standing in front of whatever and talking to screen. Sometimes it's not a comfortable place to start off in, but you can get used to it. Like I said, there's not every part of my job I enjoy. Certain things in my job I absolutely hate doing. It's just part of the job. But then you get some print journalists who don't even realise how good they are just chatting about their subject. And even female commentators, as in they could be an expert in their industry, and they put off going in front of camera and say, oh no, I don't want to do that, don't put me in front of a microphone, I'm happy to give you a quote, but I don't want. It turns out they're fabulous, you know.
And a man will always
jump in.
Well, I'm telling with less half the experience.
We'll just jump in. So there's I think definitely don't be put off by the fact that someone's going to make you talk on screen, but and there's definitely a space for journalists like that. Absolutely.
Researchers and all the
and,
programs.
And definitely in the BBC, that's, you know, when you come in at entry level, that's where you're going into. When I got my first job in BBC, I was on our digital team because I come from the Belfast Telegraph, so I was writing. That's probably the only bit when you talk about impartiality. Just miss writing the odd something of bit more colour to it than straight down the middle. But there's a huge industry. That's what I mean. Go and see it. Go and get a feel for different newsrooms. So, you know, and see what you like and see the amount of jobs that are there. It's hard to see from the outside looking in what's available until you do it.
Yeah.
Great. So unfortunately, that's all we have time for today. Guys, thank you so much for joining us today. I'm so grateful to have you here with our panel. Learned a load, everything here. So this is great for us. You know, we're going to take a personal benefit from this as
really
well.
Good advice.
Yeah.
Thank you so much.
And thank you all for coming as well. We really appreciate the support for this as well. But yeah, that's all we have for today. Thanks very much.
Thank you.
Thank you. Well, that was it.
Right now. So let's not draw the line, 'cause I can't make my mind up right now. So let's just wait a while. The one I need is tied up right. It's unintended, but all in vain. It's what I found on my side. You knew I'd pass through, it's all the same. So let's get down to why. The one I need is tied up right now. So let's just wait